The space around Kepler 442b looked like a graveyard. Broken ships floated in the darkness, their hulls torn open and leaking atmosphere into the void. Admiral Tamin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet die piece by piece. The enemy ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. They looked alive, with surfaces that rippled like skin and weapons that grew from their hulls like deadly flowers. These were Vorthak bioships, and they were winning. "Admiral, we've lost the Crystal Wing," reported his tactical officer. The Althari ship had been one of their strongest vessels, its crystal hull supposedly unbreakable. Now it was just glowing fragments in space. Tamin clenched his fists. "What about the Nephian cloud ships?" "3 destroyed, sir. The gas dwellers can't adapt fast enough. Every time they change their attack pattern, the Vorthak ships learn and counter it." The Admiral looked at the tactical display. Red dots showed enemy positions. Blue dots showed his own ships. There were far too many red dots and far too few blue ones. His mixed fleet of alien species had superior technology, but it wasn't enough. The Vorthak bioships adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every strategy they used. "Sir, the collective hive ships are requesting new orders," said another officer. Tamin almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Orders? What orders could he give? Everything they tried failed. The bioships learned from each attack and became immune to it. His tactical computers had run thousands of simulations, and every single one ended in defeat. A new alarm sounded, on the bridge. "Admiral, another wave of Vorthak ships is approaching from the far side of the planet." Tamin studied the scanner readings. The new ships were even larger than the first wave, their bio-hulls pulsing with strange energy. His fleet was already losing badly against the current enemy forces. These reinforcements would finish them completely. "How long before they reach us?" he asked. 47 minutes, sir. 47 minutes until total defeat." Tamin had fought in many battles during his long career, but he had never faced anything like this. The Vorthak didn't just have superior numbers or firepower. They had something worse. They could learn and adapt faster than his forces could change tactics. His communication officer suddenly looked up from her station. "Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the transport ship Iron Phoenix." "A transport? What's a civilian ship doing in this battle zone?" "Sir, they're requesting permission to approach the flagship. The captain says he has military personnel aboard who might be able to help." Tamin almost dismissed the message. What could a transport ship do that his warships couldn't? But then he remembered that the Iron Phoenix had been returning from the Outer Rim territories. That was where the humans had been fighting their war. "Put them through," he said. The main screen flickered, and a human face appeared. The man was older than Tamin expected, with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes. Scars marked the left side of his face, and his uniform was clean, but showed signs of long use. "Admiral Tamin, I am Colonel Sung Ho of the 47th Terran Shock Battalion. We've been monitoring your battle communications. Request permission to come aboard and assist." Tamin studied the human's face. There was something in the man's eyes that he had seen in other veterans, a look that came from seeing too much death and somehow surviving it. "Colonel, with respect, we're facing an enemy that adapts to every weapon and tactic we use. Our best ships and most advanced computers can't find a solution. What can a single human battalion do?" Sung Ho's expression didn't change. "Admiral, my battalion just spent 5 years fighting the Harbingers. We learned how to defeat an enemy that could predict and counter every conventional strategy. The Vorthak bioships remind me of that war. The Harbingers." Tamin had heard stories about that conflict. Humanity had faced complete extinction against self-replicating machines that turned entire star systems into factories. Most of the galactic community had expected humans to be wiped out completely, but they had won. Somehow, against impossible odds, they had defeated an enemy that every computer model said was unbeatable. "How many soldiers do you have, Colonel?" 237. "Effective, sir. We're not at full strength. Less than 250 humans against a fleet of bioships that was destroying his 1,000-ship armada." It sounded insane. But Tamin looked at his tactical display again. watching another of his vessels break apart under enemy fire. "Colonel, I'll be honest with you. We have perhaps 2 hours before total defeat. My tactical computers predict 0 chance of victory with conventional methods. If you have anything that might help, I'm willing to listen." Sung-Ho nodded. "Permission? To bring my senior staff aboard, sir? There are things we need to show you that can't be explained over a communication link." Taemin hesitated. Standard procedure was to keep unknown military personnel off the flagship during battle. But standard procedure was getting his fleet destroyed. "Permission granted, Colonel. Docking Bay 7 will be cleared for your shuttle." The transmission ended, and Taemin turned to his bridge crew. They were all aliens, Althari with their crystalline features, Nephians in their environmental suits, members of the collective with their shared consciousness. Good officers, all of them. But they fought the way their species had evolved to fight, with logic, planning, and predictable patterns. Maybe that was the problem. 20 minutes later, Colonel Sung-Ho walked onto the bridge. He was followed by 5 other humans, all bearing the same scars and weathered look as their commander. Taemin noticed that they moved differently than other soldiers he knew. They didn't march in formation or follow standard military bearing. Instead, they moved with a kind of controlled randomness, never quite where he expected them to be. "Admiral," Sung-Ho said, saluting. "Thank you for seeing us." Up close, Taemin could see more details of the humans' appearance. Their uniforms were patched and repaired in dozens of places. Their weapons were mix-matched combinations of different technologies. Everything about them suggested a unit that had been fighting with whatever they could find, adapting and improvising to survive. "Colonel, I hope you understand our situation. We're facing total defeat against an enemy that learns from every attack." "Yes, sir. We've been studying your tactical data during the approach. The Vorthak bioships operate similarly to the Harbinger networks we fought. They sample attack patterns and develop countermeasures in real time." One of the human officers, a woman with captain's bars, stepped forward. "Admiral, may I ask what tactics you've tried so far?" Taemin gestured to the tactical display. "Everything. Coordinated strikes, massed firepower, electronic warfare, kinetic bombardment. The Althari tried mathematical precision attacks. The Nephians used fluid combat maneuvers. The collective attempted perfect synchronization. All failed." The human. Captain nodded thoughtfully. "All logical approaches, that's the problem." "I don't understand." Colonel Sung-Ho looked at his officers, then back at Taemin. "Admiral, how much do you know about the Harbinger War?" "Only what's in the official reports. Humanity faced extinction against self-replicating artificial intelligences. You somehow found a way to win." "The reports don't tell the whole story," Sung-Ho said quietly. "We lost 3 billion people in 200 worlds before we learned the secret. The Harbingers could predict and counter every logical strategy because they were perfect logical machines. To defeat them, we had to stop being logical." The bridge fell silent, except for the sounds of battle raging outside. Taemin stared at the human colonel, trying to understand what he meant. "Admiral," Sung-Ho continued, "we need to discuss something that goes against every principle of modern warfare. If you're willing to trust us, we might be able to save your fleet. But you'll have to let us fight the way humans learn to fight, with controlled chaos." Major Hyunwoo stood at the tactical display, but his mind was 5 years in the past. He could see the burning ruins of New Busan colony, smell the acrid smoke from the Harbinger factories, and hear the constant sound of metal grinding against metal as the machines built more of themselves. "Tell them about the siege," Colonel Sung-Ho said quietly. Hyunwoo nodded. Admiral Taemin and his alien officers waited, their faces showing confusion and desperation. Outside, more coalition ships were dying to the Vorthak bioships. "New Busan was one of our outer colonies," Hyunwoo began. 12 million people, mostly farmers and miners. When the Harbingers arrived, we had maybe 6,000 military personnel on the entire planet." He paused, remembering the first day when silver machines fell from the sky like rain, each one immediately beginning to consume everything around it to build more machines. The Harbingers didn't just attack us. They studied us. Every time we Set up a defensive position, they analyzed it and built the perfect counter. Every weapon we used, they developed immunity to. Every tactic we tried, they predicted and defeated. Captain Do-hyun stepped forward. She was one of the youngest humans on Sung-ho's team, but her eyes held the same haunted look as the others. I was a lieutenant then, she said. My company was stationed at the capital city's spaceport. We had standard defensive positions, textbook formations, proper supply lines. The Harbingers overran us in 4 hours. 4 hours? Asked one of the Althari officers, his crystalline features reflecting surprise. The machines didn't just attack randomly, Do-hyun continued. They sent scouts first, analyzed our positions, calculated optimal attack vectors, then struck with perfect precision. Every shot they fired hit a target. Every move they made was mathematically perfect. Hyunwoo took over the story. After the capital fell, those of us who survived retreated to the mountains. We had no supplies, no communication with command, no hope of reinforcement. The Harbingers controlled the planet's industrial centers and were building more machines every day. The alien officers exchanged glances. Admiral Tae-min leaned forward. How did you survive? By accident at first, Hyunwoo admitted. We were trying to set up a proper military camp when Sergeant Minna made a mistake. A scarred woman near the back of the group stepped forward. Not a mistake, I got lost. Minna's voice was rough, like someone who had breathed too much smoke. I was supposed to set up observation posts on the North Ridge, but I read the map wrong and went to the South Ridge instead. Set up my position there. Started watching the valley. She paused, looking at the tactical display showing the current battle. 3 days later, a Harbinger patrol came through the valley. They scanned the North Ridge where I was supposed to be, found nothing, and moved on. They didn't even look at the South Ridge because, according to their analysis, no logical military force would put an observation post there. That's when we started to understand, Colonel Sung-ho said. The Harbingers were perfect at countering logical military tactics because they were designed by logical minds, but they couldn't handle truly random behavior. Lieutenant Jae-sung, the youngest member of the human team, spoke up. We started experimenting. Instead of setting up camps, where military doctrine said we should, we put them in places that made no tactical sense. Instead of attacking at dawn like proper soldiers, we attacked at random times. Instead of using our weapons the way we were trained, we used them wrong on purpose. Admiral Tae-min looked confused. But surely that made you less effective. In the short term, yes, Hyunwoo replied. We missed more shots, lost more battles, made more mistakes. But the Harbingers couldn't adapt to us because we weren't following any pattern they could analyze. Sergeant Bo-ra stepped forward. She was older than the others, with gray streaks in her hair and burn scars covering her hands. I was part of the resistance cell in New Seoul. The Harbingers had taken the city and were using it as a processing center. They had perfect security, cameras everywhere, patrol routes optimized for maximum coverage, defense systems that could calculate the exact position of any logical attack. She smiled grimly. So we stopped being logical. We attacked during shift changes when it made no sense to attack. We sabotaged the least important targets instead of the most important ones. We used children's toys as weapons and left real weapons behind. The Harbinger's security systems couldn't process it. The breakthrough came during the Battle of Terra Nova, Sung-ho continued. We had a full division of survivors trying to retake the planetary capital. Every conventional assault failed because the Harbingers could predict exactly what we would do. Captain Young-soo, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. He was a heavy-set man with calloused hands and the careful movements of someone who worked with explosives. I was the demolition specialist, he said. My job was to blow up the Harbinger command center. I spent weeks planning the perfect attack, optimal charges, precise timing, maximum damage. Every computer simulation said it would work. He shook his head. The Harbingers were waiting for me. They had calculated every possible approach, predicted every move I might make. I walked right into their trap. So, what did you do? Asked the Nephian bridge officer. I gave up on logic completely, Young-soo replied. Instead of using the carefully planned charges, I grabbed a bunch of mining explosives and some old fireworks from an abandoned store. Instead of attacking the command center, I blew up a random warehouse. Instead of timing it for maximum military effect, I set it off during the enemy's maintenance cycle. The alien officers looked bewildered. But how did that help? The explosion created a chain reaction that took out 3 city blocks, including 2 Harbinger production facilities they had hidden in civilian buildings. But more importantly, it confused their analysis systems. They had no data on using fireworks as military weapons. They couldn't predict what I would target next because I didn't know what I would target next. Sergeant Yunji stepped forward. She was a communications specialist with burn scars on the side of her face. That's when Command developed the entropy protocols, she said. Official military doctrine based on controlled randomness. We learned to make battle plans that changed based on dice rolls. We used random number generators to pick targets. We made decisions by flipping coins. But you still won battles, Admiral Taman said. How? Because randomness isn't the same as chaos, Colonel Sung-ho explained. We learned to be unpredictable within certain limits. We might not know which building we were going to attack, but we made sure every building we might attack was a valid target. We might not know when we were going to strike, but we made sure we were always ready to strike. Major Hyunwoo nodded. The Harbingers could handle perfect military precision. They could handle complete disorder. But they couldn't handle organized unpredictability. Their analysis systems broke down when faced with behavior that was both random and purposeful. Lieutenant Soo-jin, who had been monitoring the current battle, looked up from a portable scanner. Admiral, the Vorthak bioships are using the same adaptation patterns as the Harbingers. They sample your attacks, analyze the patterns, then develop countermeasures. But your ships are fighting with perfect tactical coordination, Captain Do-hyun added. Your Althari vessels calculate optimal firing solutions. Your Nephian ships use mathematical movement patterns. Your collective forces attack with unified timing. Everything is logical and predictable. Sergeant Min-ah looked out at the battle raging beyond the viewports. The bioships are learning from every attack because every attack follows a pattern they can understand. To beat them, you need to stop making sense. Colonel Sung-ho turned to Admiral Tae-min. Sir, we can teach your forces to fight the way humans learn to fight. But it goes against every principle of proper military conduct. Your officers will have to trust soldiers who don't follow orders the way they were given. Your computers will show tactics that appear to be completely wrong. And you'll have to accept that we might lose more battles in order to win the war. Admiral Tae-min looked at his tactical display. 3 more ships had died while they talked. His perfect alien fleet was being destroyed by an enemy that learned from perfection. Colonel, he said finally, show us how to be unpredictable. Lieutenant Jae-sung watched the alien commanders work at their stations and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the recycled air on the bridge. It was like watching ghosts from humanity's darkest hour. The Althari tactical officer moved with crystalline precision, each gesture calculated for maximum efficiency. His attacks followed mathematical principles, seeking optimal damage ratios and strategic advantages. It was beautiful in its perfection. It was also exactly how the Harbinger machines had operated. Colonel, Jae-sung said quietly to Sung-ho, they're fighting like the enemy. Sung-ho nodded grimly. He had been watching the same thing. The Nephian captain flowed between tactical positions with organic grace, but even that grace followed predictable patterns. The collective officers shared information instantly across their mental network, coordinating attacks with flawless unity. All of it was logical. All of it was efficient. All of it was exactly what the Vorthak bioships were designed to counter. Sergeant Bora stood at a monitoring station, analyzing the enemy's response patterns. She was one of the few humans who had survived the entire Harbinger War, from the first attacks to the final victory. Her scarred hands moved over unfamiliar alien controls as she tracked the bioship's adaptation cycles. Admiral, she called out, the Vorthak ships aren't just learning from your weapons, they're learning from your thinking. Admiral Tae-min turned from his command position. Explain. Every attack your forces make follows a logical pattern. The bioships sample that pattern and develop not just defenses against the weapons, but defenses against the thought process that created the attack. They're predicting what you'll do next, based on what you've done before. Captain Do-Yan stepped up to the main tactical display. The holographic battlefield showed coalition ships in blue, Vorthak forces in red. The red dots were moving in increasingly confident patterns, cutting through the blue formations like predators who knew exactly where their prey would run. "Look at this attack sequence," Do-Yan said, highlighting a group of Althari cruisers. "Perfect coordination, optimal firing solutions, textbook tactical doctrine. The bioships adapted to it in less than 10 minutes. She switched to show a Nephian formation. Organic movement patterns flowing like gas currents in space. Beautiful to watch, but completely predictable once you understand the underlying mathematics. The Vorthak figured it out even faster." The collective's attack pattern appeared next. Perfect unity. No wasted motion. Every ship acting as part of a single mind. Against most enemies, it would be unbeatable. But the bioships are treating the entire formation as one large, predictable machine. Admiral Taemin studied the displays with growing understanding and horror. "You're saying our greatest strengths are weaknesses against this enemy?" "Not weaknesses exactly," Colonel Sung-ho corrected. "Your tactics are excellent against conventional opponents. But the Vorthak aren't conventional. They're adaptation specialists, just like the Harbingers were." Lieutenant Sujin looked up from her portable analysis unit. "Admiral, I'm reading massive computational activity from the bioships. They're not just running battle simulations. They're running personality profiles of your commanders." "Personality? Profiles?" "They're analyzing the decision-making patterns of each ship captain. The bioships are learning to think like your officers think, so they can predict future moves before those moves are made." Major Hyun-woo walked over to the main display and pointed at a cluster of enemy ships. "See how they're positioning themselves? They're not just blocking your current attack vectors. They're blocking the attack vectors your commanders haven't even thought of yet, because they know how Althari minds work, how Nephian minds work, how collective minds work." Sergeant Minna had been quietly observing the bridge crew during the conversation. Now she approached Admiral Taemin. "Sir, may I ask you something? When you plan an attack, what do you consider first?" Taemin looked puzzled by the question. "Optimal use of resources, of course. Maximum damage to the enemy while minimizing losses to my own forces. And how do you decide which target to hit?" "Strategic importance. Primary targets that will have the greatest impact on enemy capability." Minna nodded. "And when do you prefer to attack?" "When conditions are most favorable. When our forces have the best chance of success." "Perfect," Minna said, but her tone suggested it was anything but perfect. "Admiral, you just described exactly how the Harbinger machines planned their attacks against us. Optimal resource use, primary strategic targets, maximum favorable conditions." The bridge fell silent except for the sounds of battle outside. More coalition ships were dying while they talked. Captain Young-soo pulled up his own tactical analysis. "Admiral, look at your fleet's attack patterns over the last hour. Every decision has been logical and optimal. Your Althari ships attack with mathematical precision. Your Nephian forces flow like efficient gas currents. Your collective vessels coordinate with perfect unity." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "The bioships have adapted to all of it because all of it follows rules. Rules can be learned, predicted, and countered." Lieutenant Jae-sung stepped forward. "During the Harbinger War, we discovered that the machines couldn't adapt to true randomness. But it's not enough to just do random things. Random stupidity is still stupidity. We had to learn controlled randomness, being unpredictable while still being effective." Sergeant Yoonji, who had been monitoring communications, looked up with worry in her eyes. "Colonel, the Vorthak fleet is changing formation. They're not just adapting to current attacks anymore. They're positioning themselves to counter attacks that haven't been ordered yet." On the main display, the red enemy formations were moving into positions that made no sense for countering the coalition's current strategy. But when Young-soo ran tactical projections, the purpose became clear. "They're predicting our next move," he said quietly. "The bioships know that after this attack fails, Admiral Taemin will logically order a flanking maneuver using the reserve squadrons. They're already moving to counter it." Admiral Taman stared at the display, feeling a chill of recognition. This is how you felt fighting the Harbingers, like the enemy was reading your mind. Exactly, Colonel Sung-ho replied. And the only way to fight an enemy that can read your mind is to stop thinking the way they expect you to think. Captain, Do-hyun approached one of the Althari officers at a tactical station. Commander, may I ask how you calculate your attack solutions? The crystalline being turned toward her, his faceted features reflecting the bridge lights. We use optimal mathematical analysis to determine maximum efficiency ratios between energy expenditure and damage output. And you, Commander? Do-hyun asked a Nephian officer. We flow with the natural patterns of space and time, seeking harmony between our movement and the cosmic currents that guide all things. She turned to one of the collective representatives. Your approach? We share all tactical data instantly among our vessels, creating perfect coordination through our mental unity. No information is lost, no decision is made in isolation. Do-hyun nodded and looked back at the humans. 3 different species, 3 completely different approaches to warfare, but they all have one thing in common. They all make sense, Sergeant Bora said. Mathematical optimization, natural flow patterns, perfect information sharing. It's all logical, which means it's all predictable. Colonel Sung-ho walked to the center of the bridge. Admiral, we need to make a decision. Your current tactics are failing because they're too good, too logical, too predictable, too sensible. The bioships are learning from your excellence. He gestured toward the tactical display where more coalition ships were falling to enemy fire. We can teach your forces to fight the way humans learn to fight, but it means abandoning everything you think you know about proper military conduct. What exactly are you proposing? Admiral Taman asked. Controlled chaos, Sung-ho replied. We disable your tactical computers so they can't generate predictable attack patterns. We stop coordinating attacks so perfectly that the enemy can predict them. We start making decisions based on randomness instead of logic. The alien officers looked horrified. The Althari commander's crystalline features actually shifted color, indicating extreme distress. You want us to fight? Inefficiently? The Nephian officer asked, his voice filled with disbelief. We want you to fight unpredictably, Hyun-woo corrected. Efficiency is only useful if you can survive long enough to use it. Right now, your efficiency is killing you because the enemy can predict and counter every efficient move you make. Admiral Tae-min looked at his dying fleet, then at the scarred human soldiers who claimed they could save it. Colonel, if we do this your way, what guarantee do we have that it will work? Sung-ho met his eyes steadily. None, sir, but I can guarantee that if you keep fighting the way you're fighting now, you'll be dead within the hour. Captain Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Althari cruiser Crystal Harmony, watching the alien crew stare at her in complete bewilderment. She had just finished explaining that they needed to shut down their tactical computers and start firing their weapons randomly. But that makes no sense, the Althari captain said. His crystalline features shifting through several colors that Do-hyun had learned indicated distress. Our targeting systems achieve 97% accuracy. Random. Firing would reduce that to perhaps 30%. Exactly, Do-hyun replied, settling into the human liaison chair that had been hastily installed. The bioships have adapted to your 97% accuracy. They know exactly where you're going to shoot because you always shoot at the optimal target. But they can't adapt to randomness. She pulled up a tactical display showing the Vorthak formation. See how they're positioned? They're protecting their most vital systems because they know logical attackers will target those systems. But what if we target their least important systems instead? The Althari weapons officer made a sound like crystal chimes in discord. That would be wasteful and inefficient. Yes, it would, Do-hyun agreed cheerfully. And that's exactly why it will work. Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening on every coalition ship. The human soldiers had spread out to serve as tactical advisors, bringing with them portable random number generators and dice that looked primitive compared to the advanced alien technology around them. On the Nephian dreadnought Flowing Current, Sergeant Yoonji was trying to explain entropy warfare to officers whose entire culture was based on natural harmony and efficient flow. You want us to fight against the natural patterns of space-time? the Nephian commander asked, his voice echoing from within his environmental suit. Not against them, Yunji corrected. Around them. Through them. In ways that don't follow any pattern at all. She had spent the last 20 minutes watching the Nephians move around their bridge like dancers, each motion flowing naturally into the next. It was beautiful, graceful, and completely predictable. Look at how you're moving right now, she said. Every step follows the natural rhythm of your species. The bioships have been watching you for hours. They know that when you shift left, you'll follow it with a spiral motion to the right. When you dive, you'll come up in a rising current pattern. She pulled out a simple coin. From now on, every movement decision gets decided by this. Heads we go left, tails we go right. Heads we dive, tails we climb. No natural patterns, no flowing harmony, just pure randomness. The Nephians recoiled, as if she had suggested something obscene. Meanwhile, on the collective command ship Unity's voice, Major Hyunwoo faced perhaps the greatest challenge of all. The collective's strength came from perfect mental coordination. Every ship captain shared thoughts with every other captain, creating flawless tactical unity. You're asking us to break our mental links, the primary collective speaker said, its voice carrying the weight of 1,000 connected minds. To fight as individuals instead of as one perfect organism. I'm asking you to become unpredictable, Hyunwoo replied. Right now, the bioships don't need to predict what each of your ships will do. They only need to predict what your collective mind will decide, and then they know what all your ships will do. He gestured at the tactical display. See how they're countering your attacks? They're not fighting 1,000 ships. They're fighting one mind that controls 1,000 ships. But if each ship captain makes independent decisions, chaos, the collective speaker said. Inefficiency, wasted effort, conflicting orders. Yes, Hyunwoo agreed. Exactly. Back on Admiral Taemin's flagship, Colonel Sung-ho was coordinating the fleet-wide transformation. Reports were coming. In from human advisors throughout the coalition forces, and most of them were variations of, "The aliens think we're insane." "Admiral," Sung-ho said, "are you sure you want to go through with this? Your officers are not happy about abandoning their standard procedures." Taemin looked at the tactical display. While they had been talking and preparing, 6 more coalition ships had been destroyed. The Vorthak bioships were moving with increasing confidence, their adaptive hulls now showing immunity patterns to every weapon type in the coalition arsenal. "Colonel, at this point I'm willing to try insanity if sanity isn't working. Give the order." Sung-ho activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All human tactical advisors, initiate Entropy Protocol 7. Repeat, Entropy Protocol 7 is now active." Across the coalition fleet, human soldiers began implementing the tactics they had learned in humanity's darkest hour. Tactical computers were shut down or switched to random number generation mode. Coordination protocols were disabled. Attack patterns were replaced with dice rolls and coin flips. The change was immediate and alarming. On the Crystal Harmony, Captain Do-hyun rolled a 6-sided die and called out, "Target the bioship's waste disposal system. All weapons random. Firing pattern." The Althari crew looked horrified as their perfectly aimed energy beams started hitting non-critical systems on the enemy vessel. Their accuracy dropped from 97% to 31%, just as predicted. But something else happened. The Vorthak bioship's hull began showing signs of confusion. Armor plating that had been optimized to deflect attacks on vital systems was suddenly useless against attacks on trivial systems. The ship started growing new defensive structures in random locations, trying to adapt to a threat pattern that didn't exist. On the flowing current, Sergeant Yunji flipped her coin and announced, "Hard dive followed by spinning climb to port." "No, wait, the coin says starboard. No natural flow, just follow the coin." The Nephian crew moved in stuttering, unnatural patterns that made them visibly uncomfortable. But their ship began evading attacks that should have hit them, because the bioships were firing at where natural Nephian movement patterns said they should be, not where random chance had actually taken them. The most dramatic change came from the collective ships. As the mental links were severed, each captain began making independent decisions. The result was apparent chaos. Ships moving in conflicting directions, attacks hitting the same targets multiple times while other targets went ignored, formations dissolving into random clusters. But the Vorthak bioships, which had been effortlessly predicting and countering the collective's unified tactics, suddenly found themselves facing 1,000 unpredictable opponents, instead of one predictable mind. Lieutenant Jae Sung, monitoring the overall battle from the flagship, watched the tactical display with growing amazement. "Colonel, it's working. The bioships are showing adaptation stress." On the screen, several Vorthak vessels were displaying erratic behavior. Their hulls rippled with conflicting defensive mutations as their adaptation systems tried to counter attacks that followed no logical pattern. But the coalition forces were paying a price for their new tactics. Friendly fire incidents increased as coordination broke down. Weapon accuracy plummeted. Several ships collided with their own allies as random movement patterns intersected. "We're taking heavy losses," Admiral Taemin observed, watching coalition ships destroyed by their own chaotic tactics. "Yes, sir," Colonel Sung-ho replied. "But we're taking them slower than before, and look at the bioships." The Vorthak fleet was beginning to show signs of genuine distress. Ships that had been adapting smoothly to coalition attacks were now growing contradictory defensive systems. Some developed armor against weapons that weren't being used while leaving themselves vulnerable to weapons that were. Others began attacking each other as their targeting systems misidentified threats in the chaotic battle. Sergeant Min-ah, coordinating with the human advisors throughout the fleet, reported increasing success. "Colonel, the bioship's adaptation cycles are breaking down. They're trying to counter randomness with logic, and it's not working." Captain Young-soo looked up from his analysis station. "Sir, I'm seeing something interesting. The bioships aren't just failing to adapt to our random tactics. They're actively becoming less effective as they try to process the randomness." On the tactical display, Vorthak ships were beginning to move in increasingly erratic patterns. Their formation integrity was breaking down as individual ships developed different adaptation strategies that conflicted with each other. "It's like watching the Harbinger networks collapse all over again," Lieutenant Soo-jin observed. "Perfect logical systems can't handle true randomness. It breaks their ability to process information." Admiral Taemin watched his fleet transform from a precision military force into what looked like organized chaos. Ships fired randomly, moved unpredictably, and ignored conventional tactical wisdom. It should have been a disaster. Instead, for the first time since the battle began, coalition forces were not losing faster than they could fight. Sergeant Woo-jin floated through the broken corridor of the Vorthak bioship, his magnetic boots clicking against the organic metal walls. Behind him, a mixed boarding party of humans and aliens moved cautiously through the alien vessel they had managed to disable. The bioship was unlike anything he had seen during the Harbinger War. Where the machine ships had been cold metal and circuitry, this vessel felt alive. The walls pulsed with a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. Bioluminescent patterns flickered under the surface, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Stay together," Woo-jin commanded. "And remember, don't try to make sense of anything, you see. The moment you start thinking logically about this place, it might start thinking logically about you." Behind him, Althari Commando Kethvar moved with crystalline precision. But Woo-jin could see the alien soldier was struggling with the human-taught principle of controlled randomness. Every few steps, Kethvar would pause and consult a small device that generated random numbers, then force himself to move in whatever direction it indicated instead of the tactically optimal path. The Nephian Marine Velhan flowed behind them, but his natural graceful movement was interrupted by sudden, jarring direction changes whenever his assigned coin flip demanded it. The effect was disturbing to watch, like seeing a dancer suddenly seized by random spasms. "Sergeant," called out the collective soldier designated Unit 47, "I am detecting significant bioelectric activity ahead. The ship's central processing system appears to be distressed." They rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast chamber that defied the ship's external dimensions. The space was filled with pulsing organic structures that looked like a cross between computer circuits and living tissue. Thick cables of biomatter snaked across surfaces that shifted and rippled like skin. But something was clearly wrong. The organic circuits sparked with erratic energy. Some of the biocables had torn themselves apart, their ends writhing like injured snakes. The whole chamber flickered between different configurations as if it couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. By the crystal matrices, Kethvar whispered, "What happened here?" Wujin approached one of the larger biocomputing nodes. Through the translucent surface, he could see what looked like neural pathways firing in chaotic patterns. It reminded him of the Harbinger network cores they had found after those machines had been exposed to prolonged human entropy tactics. "It's the same thing that happened to the Harbinger minds," he said. "They tried to process true randomness and it broke them." Unit 47 extended sensory tendrils toward the damaged biocircuits. "I can detect residual thought patterns in the organic matrix. The ship was attempting to analyze and predict human tactical behavior when it malfunctioned." Velhan flowed closer to another bionode, his gaseous form allowing him to examine it from multiple angles. "The patterns are contradictory. The organism was simultaneously trying to develop defenses against every possible human action, while also developing defenses against the absence of human action. It created an impossible logical loop." Wujin nodded grimly. "During the Harbinger War, we called it recursion collapse. The enemy's analysis systems would get caught in infinite loops trying to predict unpredictable behavior. Eventually, the loops would consume all available processing power, and the system would crash. They moved deeper into the chamber, passing more damaged biocircuits. Some had grown elaborate defensive structures that served no purpose. Others had developed weapons systems aimed at their own ship. A few had simply shut down entirely, their organic components withered and dark. "Sergeant," Unit 47 reported, "I am detecting similar conditions throughout the bioship fleet. The vessels are experiencing systematic cognitive breakdown." Through the translucent walls, they could see the battle raging outside. The Vorthak bioships were moving in increasingly erratic patterns. Some had grown so much random armor that they could barely maneuver. Others had stripped away all their defenses and were attacking frantically at empty space. Kethvar studied one of the functioning bionodes. "The organic computers are still trying to analyze human behavior," he observed. "But each attempt to understand randomness generates more randomness in their own systems." "It's spreading," Velhan noted. "The confusion is propagating from ship to ship through their communication links." Wujin felt a familiar chill. This was exactly what had happened to the Harbinger network. The machines had been so interconnected that when one unit experienced recursion collapse, it had spread the breakdown to every other unit in the network. "We need to get back to the fleet," he said. "This is about to get much worse for the Vorthak." As if responding to his words, the bioship around them shuddered. The organic walls began rippling more violently, and several biocircuits exploded in showers of sparks and biological fluid. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear sounds that were definitely not normal. Groaning noises like metal under stress, but with an organic quality that suggested pain. High-pitched keening sounds that might have been electronic feedback, or might have been screaming. "The ship is in distress," Unit 47 observed with typical collective understatement. They fought their way back toward their entry point as the bioship continued to malfunction around them. Corridors reshaped themselves randomly, sometimes creating dead ends where passages had been moments before. Gravity fields fluctuated wildly, making movement difficult and unpredictable. Behind them, they could hear the central processing chamber destroying itself as the organic computers tried to solve the unsolvable problem of predicting pure randomness. They reached their shuttle just as the bioship's hull began growing random protrusions. The vessel looked like it was trying to adapt to every possible threat simultaneously, creating a chaotic mass of conflicting defensive systems. As their shuttle pulled away from the dying bioship, Wujin activated his communication link to the fleet. "Colonel Sung Ho, this is boarding team Alpha. The bioships are experiencing complete system breakdown. It's just like what happened to the Harbingers." Sung Ho's voice crackled through the link. Confirmed, Sergeant. We're seeing it fleet-wide. The Vorthak vessels are attacking each other now. Their adaptation systems are generating contradictory instructions. Through the shuttle's viewports, they could see the Vorthak fleet dissolving into chaos. Bioships that had been perfectly coordinated were now firing on each other as their targeting systems misidentified threats. Some vessels had grown so much defensive armor that their weapons couldn't fire. Others had adapted their hulls so extensively that they were no longer spaceworthy. How is this possible? Kethvar asked. The Vorthak are supposed to be adaptation specialists. How can adaptation itself be their weakness? Wu Jin thought about the 5 years of hell that humanity had endured learning to fight the Harbingers. Because perfect adaptation requires perfect logic, and perfect logic can't handle perfect randomness. When you try to analyze something that has no pattern, you create patterns in your own mind trying to find one. Eventually, those false patterns destroy your ability to think clearly. Unit 47 processed this information through its shared consciousness. The Vorthak bioships were designed to be superior to any logical opponent. But humans are not logical opponents. That's the thing about surviving an impossible war, Velhan observed. It teaches you to be impossible soldiers. On Admiral Tayman's flagship, the tactical display showed the complete collapse of Vorthak fleet coordination. Bioships were growing random appendages, firing at empty space, and attacking their own allies. The adaptation systems that had made them unstoppable were now making them uncontrollable. Admiral, Colonel Sung Ho reported, the enemy fleet is in complete disarray. Their bioships can't process randomness, so they're generating randomness in their own systems trying to adapt to it. It's a cascade failure. Admiral Taymin watched in amazement as the fleet that had been destroying his forces an hour earlier fell apart before his eyes. Colonel, how did you know this would work? Because we learned something during the Harbinger War that no other species has had to learn, Sung Ho replied. Sometimes the only way to defeat perfect logic is with perfect illogic. The Vorthak built the ultimate adaptation machines, but they never considered what would happen when those machines tried to adapt to chaos itself. Lieutenant Jae-sung looked up from his scanner readings. Sir, the remaining bioships are retreating. Those that are still capable of movement anyway. On the tactical display, perhaps a third of the Vorthak fleet was limping away from the battlefield. The rest were either disabled by their own malfunctioning adaptation systems or had destroyed themselves trying to process human unpredictability. The battle was over. Humanity's controlled chaos had triumphed over alien perfection. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Tae-min stood in the main conference room of his flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing damage reports, casualty lists, and strategic analyses. The victory over the Vorthak bioships had saved his fleet, but the implications of how they had won were causing shockwaves throughout the Galactic Defense Coalition. Colonel Sung Ho entered the conference room, followed by his senior staff. The human soldiers looked tired but alert, their scarred faces showing the strain of the past few days. They had spent 72 hours helping coalition forces restore normal tactical systems and coordination protocols. Colonel, Admiral Tayman said, gesturing to the holographic displays, my tactical analysts have been studying the battle data. They're having difficulty accepting what they're seeing. The displays showed coalition ships firing at seemingly random targets, moving in chaotic patterns, and achieving victory through methods that violated every principle of military science. Efficiency ratings had dropped by 60%. Coordination scores had fallen to levels that should have guaranteed defeat, and yet they had won. Admiral, said Commander Yuna, the fleet's chief tactical officer, we need to discuss the implications of what happened. If entropy warfare is effective against adaptive enemies, we need to integrate it into our standard doctrine. Sung Ho shook his head. Ma'am, with respect, that's not how it works. The moment you make randomness into a system, it stops being random. Captain Duyan stepped forward to help explain. During the Harbinger War, we tried to create standardized entropy protocols, training manuals for controlled chaos, official procedures for unpredictable behavior. Every attempt failed because real randomness can't be taught through standard methods. Lieutenant Jae-sung nodded. The Harbingers adapted to our random tactics within days once those tactics became systematic. True entropy warfare can only work if it remains truly unpredictable, which means it can never become standard doctrine. Admiral Taemin studied the humans with growing understanding. So what you're telling me is that your greatest military advantage is something that can't be replicated or systematized. Exactly, Colonel Sung-ho replied. The Vorthak bioships were designed to counter logical military thinking, but they weren't designed to counter the kind of thinking that develops when a species faces complete extinction against impossible odds. Sergeant Minna moved to one of the tactical displays. Admiral, look at these adaptation patterns from the bioships. They're incredibly sophisticated, capable of countering any systematic approach to warfare, but they have one fatal flaw. They assume their opponents will behave rationally. She highlighted several sections of the battle data. Every alien species in the coalition fights rationally, just in different ways. The Althari use mathematical optimization. The Nephians follow natural flow patterns. The collective achieves perfect coordination. All different, but all logical systems that can be analyzed and countered. But human combat doctrine isn't logical, asked the Althari tactical specialist, his crystalline features shifting through confused colors. Major Hyunwoo answered, Our doctrine is based on surviving the impossible by abandoning logic when logic doesn't work. Most species develop military tactics through theoretical study and controlled combat exercises. Humans developed our current tactics by losing billions of people to an enemy that could counter every logical strategy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The other coalition species had evolved their military thinking through success and optimization. Only humanity had been forced to develop tactics through near extinction and desperate improvisation. Commander Yuna pulled up a strategic overview of the galaxy. Colonel, we've received intelligence reports indicating that the Vorthak Empire is mobilizing additional fleets. Hundreds of bioship groups are moving toward coalition space. If they adapt their ships to counter entropy warfare, they can't, Sergeant Bora interrupted. That's the point. You can't adapt to true randomness because randomness has no pattern to learn from. The bioships that retreated from this battle are probably already experiencing cascade failures in their analysis systems just from trying to process the battle data. Captain Young-soo nodded agreement. During the Harbinger War, we discovered that exposure to extended entropy warfare actually damaged the enemy's ability to think logically about anything. The machines that survived our random attacks were less effective in all their subsequent operations. Lieutenant Soo-jin looked up from a communication console. Colonel, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. The Vorthak Empire has declared total war on the Coalition. They're deploying their entire fleet. The holographic display updated to show enemy force deployments across dozens of star systems. Thousands of bioships were moving in coordinated waves toward every major coalition world. Admiral Taemin studied the massive enemy buildup. Colonel, even with entropy warfare, we can't fight the entire Vorthak Empire. They have overwhelming numerical superiority. Numbers aren't the issue, Colonel Sung-ho replied. The issue is whether the coalition is willing to fight the way humans learned to fight. Commander Yuna leaned forward. What do you mean? Look at how your forces reacted to entropy protocols during the battle, Major Hyunwoo said. The alien crews were horrified by the concept of deliberate inefficiency. They followed orders, but they fought against their own instincts every step of the way. Sergeant Yoonji nodded. True entropy warfare requires more than just following random orders. It requires thinking like someone who has nothing left to lose, who is willing to try anything because conventional wisdom has already failed. Captain Do-hyun walked to the tactical display showing coalition fleet positions. Admiral, your species are all successful. Your civilizations developed advanced technology, achieved interstellar travel, built prosperous societies. You've never faced total extinction against an impossible enemy. And that's your weakness, Lieutenant Jae-sung added. You still believe that logical, efficient, optimized solutions can solve any problem. You've never had to learn that sometimes the only way to win is to stop trying to win in any way that makes sense. Admiral Tae-min considered this. So you're saying that humanity's military advantage comes from having learned to think like desperate survivors rather than professional soldiers? More than that, Colonel Sung-ho said. We learned to weaponize desperation itself. When you have nothing left to lose, you become capable of strategies that no successful species would ever consider. A new alarm sounded on the bridge. Lieutenant Soo-jin checked her communications panel. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting Vorthak bioships entering the outer system. 3 fleets, estimated 200 ships each. The tactical display updated to show the approaching enemy forces. These bioships looked different from the ones they had fought before. Larger, more heavily armed, with hull modifications that suggested they had been specifically designed to counter human tactics. They're adapting, Commander Yuna observed. The Vorthak have built new ships based on what they learned from the previous battle. Colonel Sung-ho studied the approaching fleets with interest rather than concern. Good. That means they're still trying to solve randomness with logic. They think they can build better ships to counter chaos. Sergeant Minna smiled grimly. They still don't understand. You can't engineer a solution to true unpredictability. The harder they try to counter our tactics, the more predictable their countermeasures become. Admiral Tae-min looked at the massive enemy force approaching his position. Colonel, are you certain your entropy warfare will work against ships specifically designed to counter it? Admiral, Sung-ho replied. During the Harbinger War, the enemy rebuilt their entire network 12 times trying to counter human tactics. Each iteration was more sophisticated than the last. Each one failed for the same reason. They were still trying to use perfect logic to defeat imperfect illogic. He gestured toward the approaching Vorthak fleets. Those ships represent the culmination of alien logical thinking applied to the problem of fighting humans. They're probably the most sophisticated adaptive weapons ever created. And that's exactly why they're going to lose. Sergeant Woo Jin looked out at the stars where the enemy fleets approached. The Vorthak Empire is about to learn what the Harbingers learned, that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the best weapons or the smartest tactics. It's the one that's willing to embrace beautiful madness when sanity isn't enough. As alarms continued to sound throughout the fleet, the human soldiers began preparing for the greater war ahead. They moved with the confident randomness of people who had already survived the impossible once, and who knew that controlled chaos could triumph over any form of organized perfection. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest gift to the stars wasn't their technology or their courage. It was their ability to find victory in the places where logic said victory was impossible.